Hi, this is my book talk on Refugee by Alan Gratz. I'll be sharing um, my thoughts on Refugee. This novel follows the lives of three young refugees from different countries at a different time periods. Although each story takes place decades apart, they all explore the same question: what would you do if your home was no longer safe? The story follows Josef Landau, a 12-year-old Jewish boy living in Nazi Germany in 1939. After Kristallnacht, his family is forced to flee Germany aboard the MS St. Louis, hoping to find safety in Cuba. Instead, they experience rejection after rejection as countries refuse to allow Jewish refugees to enter. Josef's story is based on real historical events surrounding the voyage of the St. Louis. The second story introduces Isabel Fernandez, an 11-year-old girl living in Cuba in 1994. Political and economic hardships lead her family to risk everything by building a small raft and attempting the dangerous journey across the Florida Straits to the United States. Her story reflects the real Cuban raft exodus of the 90s. The third story follows Muhammad Bishara, a 13-year-old boy fleeing the civil war in Syria in 2015. His family travels across several countries, facing dangerous border crossings, overcrowded refugee camps, and uncertainty as they search for a place where they can begin again. The reason I chose Refugee is because Alan Gantz combines his historical events with real historical events with fictional characters. The people in the novel are fictional, but the settings and conflicts and many of the events and experience are historically accurate. This is what makes the novel historical fiction. Readers become emotionally connected with the physical characters while learning about real moments in history. As you can see from the timeline, the novel closely follows the important historical events. Joseph's life story begins with Kristallnacht in 1938 and follows the real voyage of the MS St. Louis in 1939, where more than 900 Jewish refugees were denied entry into Cuba, and the United States before being forced back to Europe. Isabel's story is set during the Cuban raft exodus of 1994, when thousands of Cubans attempted to reach the United States by sea, and Muhammad's story takes place during the Syrian refugee crisis in 2015, when millions of people fled war and violence. I'd like to read a brief excerpt from Yosef's story that demonstrates why this novel is historical fiction. Yosef followed the small group of kids through the raised doorway on the bridge of the St. Louis. The bridge was narrow, curving rooms that stretched to the side of this other. Sunlight streamed through the 24 windows, offering a panoramic view of benches and maps and rulers, and the walls were dotted with mysterious gauges and meters of shining brass. There were a number of crewmen on the bridge, some wearing their blue and white sailor uniforms. So that excerpt was read because it takes the boat that is real and it gives details that only could be known if you were on that ship, but in a way that is familiar only to Yosef. The aspect of this novel that I found most powerful is the ending. Throughout most of the book, the three stories seem separate, but the final chapters, readers discover that the families are connected across generations. This connection reinforces the author's message that the refugee experience is not limited to one country or one period in history. Although the circumstances change, families continue to flee persecution, war, and violence in search of safety. Reading Refugee also changed the way I think about history. History can sometimes feel like a collection of dates and events, but this novel reminds us that historical events affected real children and real families. While Yosef, Isabel, and Muhammad are fictional characters, their experiences represent the lives of countless refugees throughout history. I highly recommend Refugee for middle school and high school readers. It's suspenseful and emotional and historically accurate, while uh, encouraging readers to develop empathy and deeper understanding of the refugee experience. It also pairs well with biographies such as Anne Frank's because it works to remind us that the history is ultimately about peoples whose lives were forever changed by the events around them. Thank you.